However, the news continues to be, one of the largest issues in the news continues to be, and broadly, is this whole issue of the torture memos that were released. Actually, the ACLU did the lawsuit, and the ACLU was preparing to release these in any case. They had them. They had the legal right to release them. And they had already, 2 years earlier, the essence of them had been released in Ron Suskind's book, The 1 Minute Solution. As Barack Obama pointed out in his speech, this stuff was already a matter of public record and public knowledge. But the Bush administration itself took a rather unprecedented step of releasing these torture memos, raising a whole variety of questions. And over the weekend, we saw the spectacle of Rahm Emanuel on national television saying that not only was the administration not going to prosecute torturers, apparently Lindy England and Charles Granger exempted, but also not the authors of them. And, there's no shortage of people on the left speaking out about this. I thought it would be interesting to get the thoughts of somebody who is inside the administration and the Reagan administration as well before that. So Richard Pearle, resident fellow at the American Enterprise Institute, was Assistant Secretary of Defense under Ronald Reagan, worked on the Defense Policy Board Committee from 1987 to 2004, chairman of that board from 2001 to 2003 under the Bush administration, and one of the signers of the Project for a New American Century letter back in 1998 calling for a regime change in Iraq, is with us. AEI, American Enterprise Institute.org, the website for his work. Richard Pearle, welcome to the show. Welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Just a small correction. I was not part of the Bush administration. I served on an advisory board for 18 years, which spanned a number of administrations, and I was appointed to that by both Democrats and Republicans.
Okay. So noted. I'm curious your thoughts on the not just the release, A, the release of these documents, but B, the fact we spent. Well, let me rephrase this. We spent the better part of an hour and a half this morning looking for an example of an American who was taken hostage, or who was captured by a foreign government and tortured to extract information. Because I thought that it would be, a great example of reciprocal outrage. And outside of the Vietnam War, we could not find any. There's some concern about people who've been taken hostage by criminals, the drug gangs down in Mexico and whatnot, but not by a foreign government. Your thoughts on what happened here?
Well, I think that in the aftermath of 9/11 and desperate to learn whether other attacks were being planned, the administration decided that as long as it didn't rise to the level of torture, aggressive techniques would be permitted. There now, of course, is debate about whether they crossed the line,
right,
and did in fact authorize torture. And when you read those memos, it's clear that they are struggling with the issue of what constitutes torture. And the word severe appears, I would guess, 100 times in a 50-page memo, because the various statutes and agreements involved don't define the word severe. But severe is the dividing line between torture and something that falls.
But we did prosecute. I mean, there is a precedent in American law. We prosecuted Japanese prisoners of war, and we executed one for waterboarding Americans in the Philippines during World War II. So we have, the United States government has said in the past, in court, and actually put somebody to death for torture, which was waterboarding.
Well, I just finished reading the document, and it's clear that it isn't clear that waterboarding, which is not fatal and simulates drowning but does not constitute drowning, is obviously torture. I think.
So you're saying somebody has to die in order for it to be torture? Over 30 people died, by the way, in U.S. custody during this time. We don't know how many of them were being interrogated. At least 3 of them.
Well, I don't know those details, but no, I'm not saying someone has to die in order to constitute torture. As I read the memo, and I'm not a lawyer, the issue they were grappling with had to do with definitions of word severe.
Right.
And the application of the term.
No, I saw that same thing in them. I'm wondering what your.
I happen to think that the aggressive techniques are probably not very effective, and they're certainly not worth the opprobrium that attaches to using them.
Yeah.
So I'm certainly not defending the practice of waterboarding or any other.
Well, it seems, there's a footnote to one of these documents that points out that in the case of Abu Zubaydah, that the CIA, despite the belief of the interrogators that the prisoner had already told them all he knew, in other words, he had laid out everything, they continued to waterboard this guy. And that was when he started coming up with all these wild things that sent us off on all these wild goose chases that cost us, at the very least, millions of dollars and possibly several American lives going into places that we had no business being, and there was no. I mean, he was just pulling stuff out of thin air in order to stop the pain at that point, because he had already told us everything we knew. Shouldn't we, Richard Pearle, or should we, in your opinion, should we be prosecuting the torturers? I mean, we already have sort of a precedent for that. Charles Granger and Lindy England are in prison right now. Should we be prosecuting the torturers? Or should we be prosecuting the people who wrote these torture memos, Jay Bybee and company, or possibly all the way up to George Bush, who has said that he authorized this in a news conference, or not? And if not, then how do we reconcile this, our participation in the Nuremberg war tribunals and, signing the UN Convention Against Torture?
Well,
and our federal laws against torture.
Look, as you read the memo and the statutes that the Justice Department officials were attempting to interpret, they do not say in there that they are justifying torture. They argue that what they are justifying, that is these enhanced techniques or whatever euphemism you want to use, did not constitute.
No, I understand that, and I agree with you on that legal nicety. But the current administration has defined these things as torture, and past administrations have defined these things as torture. International tribunals have defined these things as torture. The United States courts have defined these things as torture. I think that we can safely say, at least if it went into court, there would be a strong case to argue that they were torture. Let me ask the question another way. If an American were taken hostage, were arrested in, say, Greece, and the Greek government decided that American was somehow involved, there is, Operation 57 or something like that, the Greek terrorist group over there, or at least there was 20 years ago. And the Greek government tortured that American, used these same techniques against that American. Do you think that we should ask for the prosecution of that Greek officer?
Well, I think it's. I don't mean to evade the question. It's very difficult without the specifics of the specific circumstances.
Well, let's say they were identical but reversed.
Well, identical to what? To waterboarding? Do you want to concentrate on waterboarding? Because the memo deals with
waterboarding, slapping somebody's head against the wall, freezing them, putting them in a box with insects, putting their children in boxes with insects within their hearing range, as apparently was done with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Well, my reaction to those would be different in each case.
If these things were done to an American, would you be outraged and be calling for retribution?
Oh yeah, I certainly would be outraged, and I'm outraged that they were done at all. But that's not the question you asked. You didn't ask whether I was outraged or whether people should be outraged. You asked whether people should be prosecuted.
Would you be calling for the prosecution?
Who were following what they believed to be guidelines approved by the government. So when it comes to the torturers, if they stayed within the guidelines, I think to now go back...
Sir, we've got to take a break. Can you stick around for just a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you very much. Richard Pearle is with us. We'll be right back. AEI.org.